So I started rereading the Star Wars Legends Tales anthology books from the 1990s for the channel, and while the books are the definition of a mixed bag, some stories stand out. And for me, the best story in each book was written by Daniel Keys Moran. And a thought occurred to me. I've only enjoyed his work for like 30 years, maybe I should check out his books. So, the Armageddon Blues. I do not like this cover. Like, at all. It is not my favorite. But it's the cover we've got. So the book follows Jalian D'Arsenet E. Ken Severin, say that 10 times fast, aka Jalian of the Fires, a young girl growing up in a community of female warriors in the post-apocalyptic wasteland of Earth in the 2700s. The other main character is Georges Morgerot, a Frenchman born in the Napoleonic era who has a superpower. He's the enemy of entropy. He causes people to de-age, plants to grow, cars start just by being around him long enough. We first meet him as he's basically decapitated while in the trenches during World War I, quickly healing, of course. Jalian and George meet in California during the 1960s, because time travel, and Jalian decides to stop the nuclear apocalypse that created the world she knew. What follows is a globe-trotting adventure involving 3 AI computers and the 2 men responsible for creating and operating them, butter cookies, Russian spies, female presidents, visits to Saskatchewan and Tibet, blackmailing government officials, a reggae band, and a space platform called Sunflower. The book starts with some great post-apocalyptic world building, and by the time I got to page 21, if I wasn't sold yet, I would have been after this bit. The alien gods came to Earth in the early part of the 28th century, as measured from the death of a man who was nailed to a tree for telling people that it was all right to love each other. Their landing craft dropped out of a clear blue summer sky and set down on a strip of what appeared to them to be a sort of primitive road. They sought the civilization that would produce such a road, and found nothing. They were not surprised, these alien gods. They had seen other death worlds. They recognized the signs. If they were surprised in any degree, it was only by the obvious recency of the cataclysm. The previous owners of this world had destroyed themselves less than a running cycle ago. The alien gods, the Corvichi Spacetime Gypsies, set down to work. The ship that was their world was in trouble. Biosphere degradation, resource depletion, failing machinery. They had traveled a long, long way around the great wheel of existence, had braved the Chained One and chaos itself, and much of their equipment was designed to operate on timelines whose physical law was vastly different from the one on which they now found themselves. And so they set to work. 3 days after they set down, 80 of Clan Silver Eye's most blooded hunters climbed onto the steel stone of the big road and began the long, long run toward the ship. Many of the women wore the white of the elder hunter. They did not lag behind their younger comrades. At their head was a woman named Relish, who would one day be eldest hunter. So after the time travel bits get us to the 20th century, though, things get a little less out there. Still out there in some ways, but I definitely could have used more of the Corvichi Spacetime Gypsies. That's just... I just want to keep saying Corvichi Spacetime Gypsies. That's just a fantastic phrase. Jalian is a cool protagonist. I don't mean to compare her to other characters, but by way of description, she's kind of like if you mixed Lilu from The Fifth Element with Leela from Doctor Who, with maybe a dash of Aeon Flux. She's a badass action hero warrior of the highest order. The other characters are less fully formed, even George, but I think a lot of his motivations are kept secret to preserve the climax of the story. We definitely get the gist, though. The book was a lot of fun. It's only around 200 pages. It's very well paced. The story keeps moving quickly. A lot of the middle is setting up the pieces on the chessboard for the final act, which could have been tedious, but because the book kept me interested in what was going to happen next, I kept pushing forward. And I did not have trouble getting through this book at all. It was great. The Armageddon Blues is Moran's first book, and when I learned that from the bio at the end of the book, it made a lot of what I just read make a little bit more sense in context, which is not a bad thing. I'm sure any writer would be more than happy to have this book in their bibliography. But it maybe lacks some of the polish and soul of the guy that wrote those 2 Star Wars short stories about the Butcher of Montelli and Surratt. It's the guy's first book, give him a break. The first effort was great, but I also know that the quality will continue to improve. The Armageddon Blues is the first installment of Moran's literary universe, The Wheel of Existence. I'm sure I'll cover more books in the setting in the future, but next up I'm going to dig into the first 3 books of a sub-series of The Wheel of Existence called The Continuing Time. So how did the books work out for me? Well, let's find out. So, The Armageddon Blues was fantastic, especially for a debut novel. So I said, let's keep going. So I picked up the first 3 Continuing Time books, which I have right here. I am not big into telepaths, really. They're okay. I don't have a problem with telepaths, but they're not my favorite. And according to the afterword of Emerald Eyes, the first book in the Continuing Time, he started working on these stories when he was a kid. So it's not like he's chasing trends by using telepaths here. It's fine. It's a me problem, the telepath thing. Yeah, so when I found out the books were at least partly about telepaths, I was maybe slightly less excited than I had been initially, but still excited. Emerald Eyes. This cover is pretty dark. I mean, you probably can't really see it very well with me holding it here, so I'm probably going to have to put an image on the screen. This cover shows a UN Peace Forcer, which we'll get to, with a baby cradled in one arm and the TIE fighter pilot's big gun in the other in front of a futuristic skyline. So, you know how sometimes the covers of these sci-fi books have absolutely nothing to do with the content inside? This is not one of those times. While Emerald Eyes is not without its lighter moments, it's pretty clear from the jump that things are not going to go well for our protagonists. So it's the future. The UN has conquered and occupied the United States. France has taken over as the main global superpower and provides most of the UN's personnel. But the UN starts experimenting with genetic engineering, for super soldiers, because of course. One team of mostly Americans manages to make telepaths, who the UN uses for covert missions with their Peace Forcer troops. There's also a bunch of French-engineered telepathic human-cougar hybrids called the Denostri, but they're treated even worse than the UN telepaths. But as our story gets underway, the telepaths have managed, through the courts, to get the UN Charter updated to classify telepaths as human citizens, which is nice. While it may seem like this would solve a lot of problems for the telepaths, bringing them legitimacy on many fronts, right? They know that there will be some backlash, and they are right. The main character of this book is Carl Castaneveris, the first genetically engineered person to be successfully brought to term. The 250 or so telepaths created subsequently are at least partially based on his genetics, creating what they, among each other, call a family. Carl himself is much less stable than the rest, prone to occasional fits of rage. The rest of the family that we meet are interesting, each in their own way, but we only get to know a handful of them, and not in a ton of depth. If you're looking for deep dives into character development, this book might not be your favorite, but I was fine with it. The book does fill in some of the backstory to the Castaneveris family, and especially Carl, as it goes along. But I kind of wish a few things were established earlier, like I wish the book had introduced the team, nicknamed the Three Musketeers, on a UN mission earlier in the book, but the book is just moving so briskly, maybe there really isn't time. It's a minor quibble. So as I said, Emerald Eyes is the first book in the Continuing Time series, and I found it similar in a way to my first book, Flight of the Pangolin, in that as much as this book is telling a story, and telling it well, it's also setting the stage for the rest of the series. Like I said earlier, a lot of the characters aren't super well developed. In many cases, I suspect it's because they're maybe not going to make it to the next book. But also, a few of my favorite characters in this book are relatively minor. People make a big deal about character development, but it's not the only way to make a story interesting. You can also shoot a bad guy in the crotch with a laser. I like this book a lot. It was pretty dark, so I had to take a break before starting the next book in the series. But if you're one of those people who reads like Warhammer 40k books all the time, you should be fine. Definitely recommended for fans of telepaths and cyberpunk. If you're enjoying this video, why not buy my book? Flight of the Pangolin is the story of an intrepid group of heroes who decide to exit the solar system over the objections of an isolationist faction. There's actually a lot more going on than that. There's space pirates, a giant spider for no reason, all kinds of other things. Buy it now online wherever you buy books or at our website, www.thepangolinrepublic.com. You can also get fun t-shirts and random other stuff if you want. Wow. Some blue steel in this author photo. Fantastic stuff. Spoilers for Emerald Eyes as we talk about the long run a little bit. So if you think Emerald Eyes is maybe too much of a downer for you, and boy, I sure did, especially after I was reading Persepolis and Mouse at the same time, I'm here to tell you that the next book in the series, The Long Run, isn't nearly as depressing. Also, it is tremendous. This is a story of Trent the Uncatchable. He was one of the genetically engineered kids from Emerald Eyes, the only one who wasn't a telepath. He left the compound before it was destroyed, and almost everyone in the Castaneveris family was killed. Almost. Spoilers. So despite not being a telepath, he was still a perfect human specimen with a gift for computer systems. So as a kid, Trent had quickly become one of the elite players, a term somewhat similar to hackers. Moran comes up with parallel terms for numerous things in these books that we now have different common names for. And we're much worse off for it. We could have called the internet the crystal wind, but no, it's the internet. I'm going to call it the crystal wind from now on. Trent goes up to be not just one of the world's best players, but also a talented thief with a colorful team of ne'er-do-wells helping him. But a chance encounter with someone from his past leads him on an adventure that will make him legendary for thousands of years for reasons that this book will hint at but never actually explain. Slight spoiler. I'm not going to get too deep into what happens in this book because I loved this book. It's been a while since I've read a book that was very firmly one character's story, and you need a compelling character to pull that off, and Trent is great. There's a lot of potential for failure here. How do you make a character whose only flaw is that he's not a telepath compelling? He does it here. First of all, he's fun. Storytelling is full of wisecracking adventurers, and Trent should be right near the top of that list. He faces dramatic tension with his wits and a disarming quip. Second, even people with state-of-the-art judgment have moments where they may not be in possession of all the facts, or have to make best guesses, or find themselves in a situation where experience hasn't prepared them. Third, other characters can make life interesting for him by their actions, whether supporting characters or antagonists. Not everyone is perfect. And fourth, Moran's writing makes this whole read a breeze. This book is 372 pages, and I finished it in a week, which is really good by my standards. I do not read fast. I have a full-time job. I have things to do. I do what I can. The story moves along briskly and never felt bogged down at any point. We're always a page turn away from the next colorful new supporting character who's going to help or harm Trent. Maybe both. I'm almost tempted to say that you can read The Long Run as a standalone or book one, but I think it might do a disservice to the reader because a lot of what motivates Trent happens in Emerald Eyes. So read Emerald Eyes first, knowing that the next book is going to be even higher quality and a lot more fun. So where does the continuing time go from here? The Last Dancer. About a handful of years forward, where we follow the adventures of Denise Castaneveris, another of the Castaneveris telepaths that survived the events of Emerald Eyes. Spoiler. Wanting to make a difference, she goes to work for Douglas Ripper, a guy who just might win the next election to be Unification Secretary General. The American Tricentennial's coming up, and uprisings are expected. The new leader of the freedom-fighting Johnny Rebs is Sidon, a mysterious man with mysterious skills, a mysterious past, and a mysterious nemesis. Denise Castaneveris is the through line through the book, and while she may not be as fun a character as Trent was in the long run, she's just as compelling. Don't worry, though, Trent does appear briefly. The thing is, this book is almost 600 pages, and not all of it is about Denise. No, about halfway through the book, we start doing flashbacks to 50,000 years ago, which is not even a spoiler. A variety of supporting characters from the previous books return, and it's the end of the line for some of them. While this was never supposed to be the end of the story, and thankfully it isn't, but let's put a pin in that for the moment, it definitely reaches a climax the story has been building towards for the past 2 books. War is often both needless and inevitable, and this one is a great example. It's not quite as bleak as Emerald Eyes was, but definitely less of a fun roller coaster than The Long Run. It's almost a blend of those tones, kind of. It's hard to explain without getting into more spoilers. As I mentioned earlier, Moran does some writing stuff in this book that in lesser hands would be ill-advised, to say the least. As someone who has to juggle a lot of characters due to the nature of the story, I was really impressed with his ability to characterize them well enough that I was never really confused about where I was or who I was with. Jumping back 50,000 years was another bold move. It's clear by the end that the story as a whole is by no means finished, but it is a good spot to take a break. Since he's finally been able to retire and focus on writing, Moran has written 2 more books in the series, hopefully I'll have a chance to get to them in the future. Also, if you're a streaming service looking to spend at least a medium budget on a sci-fi series, you could do far worse than adapting these books, provided that you actually adapt the source material and not just turn it into a vehicle for crass product placement. Like I said, overall, I recommend the series. Emerald Eyes is a bit of a downer, but The Long Run is one of the best books I've read in a long, long time. So I highly recommend, if you come away with this, with anything, The Long Run is definitely your must-read. But all these are really good. Daniel Keys Moran, hats off to you, sir. So yeah, I thought all 4 of these books are really great. So definitely check them out. That's all I have for now. Tune into the next video, and we'll see you next time.